It is Tuesday night. You are working alone on an open source project, and the deployment pipeline just failed. Again. This graphic shows a real Vercel invoice for a solo developer. The total due is $105.40. But look at the highlighted line item. $92.26 of that total comes strictly from 12 hours and 46 minutes of build time. That invoice wasn't triggered by a sudden spike in traffic or heavy database usage. This application had 0 actual users. The developer was paying over $90 a month in platform rent just to compile code for an empty room. Pushing a single bug fix to production on that heavy stack took about 40 minutes of waiting. On the right, we see the exact same deployment loop executed through a lightweight, Vite-powered alternative, 4 seconds. When you are paying for hours of compute time before the real work even begins, you haven't bought growth. You have confused framework convenience with actual developer leverage. To figure out how to stop paying that tax, we need to analyze the specific trade-offs between staying in the NexJS ecosystem versus migrating to a lighter alternative like Tanstack Start to match your operational constraints. In software, true leverage removes uncertainty. It gives you fast local feedback loops, where changing a route and saving a file instantly reflects on your screen. It directly increases your daily throughput. Rent, on the other hand, is what happens when a tool designed to reduce complexity starts generating its own. A heavy stack forces you to spend hours debugging infrastructure, hydration errors, and pipeline timeouts instead of building your product. Once you start doubting code that isn't actually broken because your build pipeline is so flaky, the framework owns too much of your time. The deployment process becomes the primary bottleneck. So the evaluation we should be doing isn't about which tool wins a benchmark. We need to ask, good for whom? The answer depends entirely on the size of your team and the depth of your budget. Choosing NexJS feels exactly like moving into a fully furnished luxury apartment. The layout is predetermined, the furniture is massive, and you don't have to make any design choices. If you stay completely inside the default Vercel hosting path, the experience is highly polished. You get routing, React, and server-side rendering working beautifully right out of the box. But maintaining that setup requires constant upkeep. Solo developers often face sluggish cold starts, taking multiple seconds to wake up, unpredictable rendering bugs, and hydration issues that demand tedious local fixes. Those issues compound. Your automated build pipelines get heavier and flakier, eventually timing out entirely on their own. For an open source project, that means entire days disappear into the toolchain. You get sensible defaults and a massive ecosystem, but that convenience demands a continuous premium. You pay for it in build minutes, and you pay for it in mental exhaustion. The immediate response to high platform bills is usually a suggestion to self-host. Technically, NexJS is not locked to Vercel. You can pack up and leave. This comparison matrix highlights the reality of that move. The moment you leave the default path, your operational burden spikes from low to extreme. You suddenly have to manually own your CI setups, build caching, and artifact management. Your hosting portability carries high friction either way. Reclaiming control means the developer experience degrades rapidly. You end up spending hours babysitting pipelines just to prove your app can survive outside the company town. Notice that the development loop speed stays slow in both configurations. You haven't actually removed the complexity. You've just relocated the plumbing out of sight and into your own infrastructure, where you are now permanently responsible for fixing it. A framework that moves your complexity somewhere you can't see isn't doing you a favor. It is charging you storage on it, paid directly out of your own free time. Moving away from that heavy architecture feels like dropping a thick winter coat. Suddenly, you can move freely again. Looking back at our matrix, we add a third column for Tanstack Start. This Vite-first architecture works by deliberately reducing the framework surface area. It doesn't try to own every single part of your system. That leaner approach translates directly into throughput. Your local def loop becomes lightning fast. You change a route, save a file, and see the result in seconds, instead of waiting 40 minutes for a pipeline to clear. You also get genuine portability. Because the operational burden is low, you can deploy the app wherever you want. You pay for actual runtime usage on simpler infrastructure, entirely avoiding those massive bills for arbitrary build minutes. There is an honest trade-off here. Tanstack Start is younger, the documentation is thinner in places, and you won't always find a battle-tested Stack Overflow answer when you hit a weird edge case. But the rough edges of a new framework are visible, and they shrink over time. The alternative is paying the ongoing enterprise tax of a mature framework, a cost that remains hidden and continues to grow. For a solo developer, assuming less is the better deal. The front end goes back to being just one surface of the system, rather than the expensive, complicated center of your entire architecture. Of course, the math changes entirely if you are not working alone. A large company operates with a completely different set of constraints. They have dedicated platform engineers, expansive infrastructure budgets, and a strict reliance on standard Vercel workflows. When pipeline errors and hydration bugs occur in that environment, they don't block the entire product. The heavy maintenance load is simply distributed across multiple specialized staff members. This quadrant chart plots infrastructure budget against tolerance for pipeline complexity. Look at the top right. When you have high funding and a large team, your tolerance for complex pipelines is extremely high. In this zone, the vast ecosystem maturity of NexJS is incredibly valuable. If your organization has the personnel to absorb the architectural weight, the polished, full-service experience of NexJS remains a highly effective choice. But if you are building in the open by yourself, every extra moving part lands squarely on your desk. Every minute spent fighting a slow build is a minute stolen from actually building your product. We can map this choice using a straightforward protocol. The very first node asks about your reality. Are you a solo developer or bootstrapping a project? If the answer is no, and you have strong financial backing and a dedicated team, take the enterprise route. You can afford the NextJS workflow. If the answer is yes, you hit the second node. You have to ask yourself if operational independence and keeping your monthly operating expenses near zero are critical to your project's survival. If portability and low costs matter most, migrate. Tanstack Start allows you to eliminate platform rent and reclaim the pipeline hours you've been losing to heavy deployments. Finding true leverage is rarely about picking the industry's most powerful framework. It is about ruthlessly selecting the least wasteful one for the reality you actually operate in.